Over the years, this legendary game has received many weapon-restricted runs and challenges. But what if we did something radical? What if we did what EA Sports threatened to do to us all those years ago? What if we were in the game? Can you beat Fallout New Vegas? As a Fallout New Vegas fan, the run starts as usual. My head hurts after a night of being shot in the face. Various DLC items spawn into my underwear, and the guy who usually sells me oatmeal interrupts my hangover. Worse still, he asks me my name, and I freeze. Try to come up with something funny. Something memorable. This is worse than ordering Starbucks. Dunkin's better because they don't care. Finally, I tell the truth. My name, Greg. Trying to create the perfect representation of a New Vegas fan, I instantly disregarded playing as a woman and blitzed through the race section. Let's be honest here. Speaking of honesty, I was going to make myself bald, but then I decided to make myself into the man that my mom wants me to be. Functional, and not ugly. Can only have one. Doc said something about testing my vinegar. At first I thought he wanted to fight, and I was worried I would lose. Not seeing any weapons on the ground, I then deduced that he meant vigor, like the vigor tester machine. And I set my stats. Strength is at 8 for melee, or is it melee? Perception is at 3 for not being able to perceive when someone is annoyed at how one-sided our conversations are. I have specific interests. Endurance is at 7 for health. Charisma is at 1 for no girlfriend, or friends. Intelligence is 10 for having superior intellect to Fallout 3 normies. Agility is 7 for my ability to dodge responsibilities. And luck is at 4 because I'm bald in real life. Next was a fun little watercolor exercise. I haven't done one of these since last year, when I was in 3rd grade. I gave the funniest answers possible. No, you can't see them, and I got to pick my tag skills. For this run, I'm going with medicine, melee, and repair. Not only were each of these stats already boosted by my special points, but I intend to run a melee build. I feel like this represents the New Vegas community the best. Or maybe shotguns because they're broken. Oh well, too late now. In any case, since we're running melee, I wanted to be sure that both endurance and medicine were high enough to accommodate getting shot in the face repeatedly. Repair is just nice to have, plus a save on caps, since we won't really have barter to cover caps for repairs. For my traits, I debated on taking Built to Destroy, but felt like the weapon degradation and only 3% increase to critical hits was a bad trade. My luck is a little below average, just like in real life, and I don't want to be repairing things all the time. I decided on both heavy-handed and skilled. Skilled has a negative effect of XP gain, which is countered by 10 intelligence, and heavy-handed will increase base damage, which is already helped by 8 strength. Accentuate the positives, right? Don't wear a helmet, just bike better. With that, we set on our run objectives. Unlike most New Vegas runs, we're going to take our time and hope the game doesn't crash too many times. So we'll take the route that Josh Sawyer personally crafted for us, and we'll meet some interesting and fun NPCs on the way. I promise. First things first, I raid Doc's house. It's okay, he likes watching me do it. I use my repair and science for extra stims and a 9mm submachine gun. I'll sell it for fentanyl later. Next I step into the hot sun and bother the robot. He's a nice guy. It's like if John Marston was a Ubisoft character. Jokes aside, I went up to the gravesite to grab the snow globe and some distinctive cigarettes. If you didn't know, these can be used to help convince Swank that Benny is the guy who shot you. Oops. Spoilers. Then OBS crashed. Not New Vegas. OBS. Told you I had below average luck. So here's a recap of what you missed. I bothered Sunny Smiles. Chatted her up. She was totally into me. You just missed it. We even went on a date to the local water pump. A point that I wanted to make here too is that I like how you can avoid the tutorial in New Vegas. Sure beats waking up in a cart or prison for the 15th time. If only more people had taken note of this obscure game from 2010. Anyway, so Sunny and I came back from our first date. Well, she didn't know it was a date, but whatever. Only to find some guy bothering a local bartender. He should know that it's my job to do that. His name is Joe. How dare he? Doesn't he know that I have a problem with people named Joe? Well, not all people named Joe. Just him. Turned out he's after some guy called Ringo. I hate the Beatles, but I hate Joe more. I offered to help out Pete Best and his band of merry men, not because of him, but because it made me feel better about myself. When I talked to Doc Mitchell, I demanded he gave me painkillers like a real American. Then I talked to another guy that looked like he was more leather than man, and asked if I could borrow a stick of dynamite. He said that I should stick a gun in my mouth and stop bothering him. hurt, I ran to go drink and trauma dump at the bartender before getting enough liquid courage to talk to Sunny Smiles again. She said I had to help Ringo defeat her 5 evil exes or whatever. They're called powder gangers. Ending them got me idolized by Good Springs, and up to level 2. I used my skill points to round out some of my stats, and I've got them on the screen now. Now that we're finally caught up, I'm in Prim, Sunny Styles has more of her exes here. But more importantly, the sheriff position is vacant. It's not really my problem, I care more about the package that was stolen from me. I asked Johnson Nash about it, but all he did was give me another quest and some exposition. I do also think that it's cool that in the base game of New Vegas, Johnson hints at Ulysses here, and my first ever playthrough, I was pretty intrigued by it. It's an effective strategy to get people interested in a single-player game's DLC. You know, so long as the rest of the game is compelling. I ran through the Bison Hotel with my machete like a methed-up homeless man runs through a McDonald's. And just like that homeless man, I also got to level 3 and put 5 points into melee and another 10 into lockpick so that I could at least do the easy ones. For reference, that's 25 in that skill. With that, I spoke to the most annoying character in the game. Well, not really. He's written well because I actually hate him, but still. See, if he were real, I'd act like I like him to his face and then make passive-aggressive comments behind his back. I was also sure to pick up plenty of pre-war money. I try to hoard it early on, but usually end up forgetting to sell it all for caps later. Wonder if that'll happen this time around. Probably, but that's what being a New Vegas fan is all about. Starting a new run telling yourself you're going to do it differently this time, but you never do. While speaking to Prim Slim, I wondered in the back of my head if the robots in this universe are aware of the passage of time. Like, was Slim Prim just wandering around the casino talking to himself? Did he think they were just closed for a really long time and forgotten about? What a hellish existence, but also fun concept that will be completely ignored in future games and shows. Like, imagine a Fallout show, or even just a quest line, that's just about an eager robot who loves his job and goes about his day in a store or whatever, and never realizes that the world ended without him. Kinda like Wall-E, only with less fat people. So I made Primp Slimp the sheriff and left Prim for good. At least Nipton is up next. Oh nice, I hear it's great this time of year. Oh, it's much prettier than how I remember it. And they even got someone to greet me. His name is Oliver. I talked to him for a bit, seemed like a cool guy. But I've seen enough New Vegas runs to know that one thing must be done. Wave him goodbye and wish him luck on his travels. Hey look, Roman cosplayers. This one has a cool voice actor. Seems like the kind of guy a college freshman would base an entire personality on for his first semester. Jokes aside, I really do love Nipton. It's such a great way to introduce the Legion. The music, the lighting during the day with the crosses lining the streets. You know, the Legion mean business right from the start, and you get what the NPCs mean when they speak about genuinely fearing them. On the way to do my errand for the Wolfmen, I got a little distracted. At first, I wanted to walk back to Oliver while he's in the middle of running through the desert. Wasn't really planning on keeping any of this footage in originally, but this gets good. There are rad scorpions that spawn on his route, and I wanted to see that if I could go over there, if I could save them. It's always the ones that seem the happiest that have a huge death wish anyways. I'm also trying to avoid the jackals that camp behind the ruined buildings like it was a Modern Warfare map. They're the bandits, they've just been given a different name here. Then I forget I'm only level 4, and at this point, rad scorpions are still scary. So I made a plan. Make the jackals fight the scorpions. I offered the jackals a job and $40 if they did my work for me. It worked beautifully. Most of them aren't around anymore to collect their pay. Better yet, I did my best impression of ZipRecruiter. There was never any job, and certainly no money. But at least the number of bodies made me look good. Okay, no more distractions. I talked to this guy to close the quest and got a little XP for it, then talked to a real-life ghost for a little more, and refused to meet Cass. She's a woman at a bar, and I'm intimidated. This'll come back to bite me later. Back on the road, I stopped by Wolfhorn Ranch to grab chopper and some steak from the oven. I'm sure it's still good. Back to my point about Ulysses, we already mentioned that Johnson Nash hints at him, but here, at this ranch, it was intended to be his. Trust me, I've done extensive research. By that, I mean I read the wiki entry once. Anyway, he was intended to be a foil to Boone. Where Boone is die-hard NCR, Ulysses was going to be the Legion version. Pretty cool, right? Hey look, more cosplayers. This time they're playing American Recess. Oof, sorry, too edgy. We're getting close to Boone. He's kind of like Shadow the Hedgehog. If he were written any other way, he'd be way too edgy to be taken seriously. And I'm just trying to one-up him, because I'm a horrible person. But I did meet up with No Bark. He's cool. And this unimportant woman, who's not related to any quest lines at all, went up to see Manny. I'm jealous of him because he gets to live in a giant lizard. My intent is to do the quest as the game lays out, where you go up to RepCon and meet a group of people who look like most of my family members, since they're dead and all. But just in case you're trying to run through this game in a hurry, you can always break into Manny's room and read his laptop. Like any good politician, he leaves incriminating evidence on his machine. He probably worked for Subway, too. It'll be the next piece of evidence you need to convince Swank to give up Benny. Oops. Spoilers. Oh wait, did I say that already? Anyway, while I'm at it, Darth Vader is Luke's father. As I made my way to RepCon, I stopped by the McBride Ranch. For those who don't know, if you want to be idolized in Novak, you have to do this small side quest. Usually, you have to wait until midnight, and a Nightkin will show up to harass cows. Completely justified. But for some reason, I found him hanging out in the middle of the day. What an odd game this is. After popping his head from his neck like a cheap McDonald's toy, I continued my way to RepCon. At first I was open to helping out the ghouls. I usually do since the quest gives a good amount of XP, but then I remembered this guy. Not only was he crazy, he was also rude. Life tip number 1, never be rude to the sweaty man holding a chunk of cement in his hands. Besides, Manny sent me here to deal with zombies, and I slaughtered them like zombies. Not just the ghouls, but the muties too. I hate them! Besides, I feel like most New Vegas fans don't love how long this quest can get, and this is a quick way to end it. It was nighttime when I returned. Perfect. I said I wanted to one-up Boone on being edgy, and what could be edgier than tricking a depressed sniper into taking out his own squad mate, and then killing him? Maybe listening to 3 Days Grace really loud when mom's not home. Jokes aside, while I like this quest as an intro to Boone, and obviously the branching paths that you can take with it, I still think there are some problems. I wish we could be more of a detective. Since I played this game before, I know to just grab the bill of sale from the motel safe, but there's very little to lead you there naturally. If you talk to the townsfolk, they'll each give you a little insight to Boone's wife, ranging from, I didn't really know her, to, I'm glad she's gone. And while I'll grant that Crawford is the only one that says she, quote, probably ran off, it's not much of an indication. You're supposed to talk to No Bark, who then says that he saw some folks run into the motel. Of course, he makes it more funnier with his lol random humor, but that is supposed to be your only clue. And while I get it's hard to make a detailed game in 18 months, I just wish this quest had a little bit more fleshed out. Like maybe poking holes in some of the stories given and then asking deeper questions of the NPCs. I'm not asking for LA Noire here, but this is probably one of the most underwhelming quests in the game. To top it all off, I couldn't even get the dialogue to pop for Manny to come visit me under the dragon. Or maybe he's just too good for it. But what is fleshed out is Helios 1. Of course, I had to stop by. Once, when I was in high school, me and a couple of buddies were biking along a railroad track and eventually came to a train yard. Similar to this, you'd kind of know you shouldn't be there, but at least you have plausible deniability on your side. What I'm saying is that I snuck in. After all, the NCR is hiding one of the best NPCs in any 3D Fallout in here.
They asked me if I knew anything about power plants. I said as much as anyone I had ever met. They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard.
He's fantastic, and just like me, his degree is also theoretical. I love how he's modeled and the fact that his voice actor chose to make him sound like an early 2000s dude bro. Anyway, after Fred Durst told me to do his job for him, I sprinted down the hall only to find evil robots and turrets waiting for me. Now, one of the cool concepts that the team behind New Vegas had was that each major quest should allow the player to access different routes if they spec'd into different things. For example, if I had enough rep with the NCR and a high enough speech skill, I could have just walked in the front door. In this case, I had a science skill of 60 and was able to shut down the turrets without needing to fight them, which for a character that consistently brings a knife to a gunfight, it's ideal. The robots were easy enough to handle. Just hit them hard enough, they'll shut up. I feel like there's an easy joke about child raising here, but I'll leave it alone. just like an orphan child on Christmas Eve. Speaking of science and science skill, one of the tenets of being a good scientist is to guess when presented with different options. Not only did I want the power to go to the full region, but I also wanted to test the weapon system, just to make sure it still works after 200 years, you know? I know that I'm being a proper scientist because when I hit the test button, all sorts of alarms and warning sirens are off. That means it's working. But get this, the NCR blamed me for the whole thing. This is an injustice. Look at him. If you hear an alarm for 20 minutes and don't immediately start panicking and running in the opposite direction, that's on you. Not to mention that once your buddies start getting vaporized from space, it's probably not a good idea to all huddle up in a group. What I'm saying is, I'm innocent. And if I haven't uploaded anything new in a month from when you're watching this, it means the NCR has found me. After vacating the power plant, I started heading for Boulder City again. Wait, no, this isn't right. There are Italians here. Sorry, Italian Americans. Their leader is a guy named Baltic Sea. Sounds fancy. He doesn't like the NCR either. In fact, he said if I commit murder against men and women who have done nothing to me, he'd reward me with nothing. Sounded like a deal at the time. Of course, the NCR tried to stop me by doing nothing as a stranger waltzed into one of their military camps in the middle of an active war zone. At this point, I'd feel wrong if I didn't take out each one of their officers one by one. After jabbing each one in the face with a portable chainsaw, I returned to Black Sea, and he gave me a pointy stick called a Liberator. Probably because it will liberate your head from your neck if used correctly. Ranger Milo insulted my name to my face on the way out, and he was the first to be liberated from his life. Well, not really. NPCs don't die, they just respawn. Either way, watching him run made me think that I could do a Liberator-only challenge in the future. Alright, no more distractions. We have to make it to Boulder City and... Oh, look! A lesbian. She wears a sack on her head. This is probably because she has no friends. Whatever, these people probably only tolerate her. You can tell by the way they openly banter with her and seemingly enjoy her company. Like any good host, they immediately started putting their guests to work. They wanted me to travel all over the wasteland and pick up cassette tapes. I blew them up. And no, I didn't save scum to get all 3 key cards. Stop asking. Veronica was mad because I murdered all of her friends. Typical woman. Now baneless, I traveled back towards Boulder City. I met some guy named Kowalski. Seems like a nice guy, even if he is Polish. Typically, in my playthroughs, I have a high enough speech skill to clear this quest peacefully. I didn't have that here. But what I did have was money for my various exploits. For just 500 caps, I was able to bribe a military officer and send the cons on their way. What I like about this quest is that it shows the versatility of New Vegas. 1, you could just use the aforementioned speech skill to finish the quest in a peaceful way. You could also do what I did and just pay off the NCR, or even use the barter skill to get the cap down from 500 to 400. And if none of these options appeal to you, you can just opt to kill one or both of the factions and resolve the quest that way. I don't think every quest in every game needs to have multiple endings, but RPGs in particular are better when they allow different endings for major quests based on how you've built your player character. It just takes player agency to the forefront, which is something that I worry major game franchises have begun to lose. But that's another topic for another day. Oh, and if you didn't know, Jessup, the lead con, has Benny's lighter on him. This is the last item you'll need to convince Swank to give him up. Again, you can either just grab this from either finishing the questline peacefully, or by committing murder. Back to the run, I started making my way towards the Boomers. I feel like a Golden Corral would have been a more fitting place to house a faction with that name, but what do I know? Well, maybe I know a lot. About Boomers anyways. And it's not just because I was raised by 2 of them. See, I've been saving as much scrap metal as I could this entire time. I didn't want to bother you with that fact. For a xenophobic group that calls outsiders savages, you'd think they'd be more resistant to trust me. But then again, who hasn't abandoned all of their principles for 37 pieces of scrap metal? Maybe if I brought scrap metal on my next trip to Japan, they'd stop calling me White Pig. Probably not. Something I noticed while talking to this kid? Listen to what he says.
Several automatic warheads detonate here 100 years ago, leaving the base highly radioactive.
I'm sure his script said atomic, but the kid said automatic. I don't blame Obsidian for missing that one. It must be expensive to hire a 5-year-old for 10 minutes. Besides, it was probably somehow Bethesda's fault anyway. But, with the Boomers on my side, I felt empowered to receive their last quest and finally head for the strip. Oh yeah, and I stopped by H&H Tools. No reason. Okay, there is a reason, and I found this while I was in there. I wonder which writer has the urologia fetish. Seriously, this game has a terrifying president's line of dialogue that references pissing, and if your rep with the NCR is bad enough, the rangers that come after you will also be surprised that your character didn't immediately start pissing. Having been raised in the Northeast, I say we have a trial. A hunt, if you will, to find out which writer was trying to weave their fetish into this masterpiece. When we find out who, we'll give them a scarlet letter. And with that, we're finally ready to confront Benny. While I'm here, I might as well. I read his emails. I knew he was a crazy man. That wasteland is much too dangerous for a 261-year-old man. So I snuck into the largest retirement home in video game history. Well, second largest. Outlast was a little bigger. But with the old people in that game, they didn't look this good. But I think there were more robots in that game. When I stepped out of Shady Shoals, I was harassed by the NCR again. But this time, they forgave me for blowing up their troops at Helios 1 and for butchering an entire encampment. How nice of them. I'll be sure to wish them a happy birthday on Facebook, but it'll be like 2 or 3 days late. After receiving a pardon like I was a turkey on Thanksgiving, I finally gave Swank the evidence he needed to let me confront his boss. Finally. I've been chasing Benny for hours, and now that I had him right where I wanted him, I let him go. I sensed something. A presence I had not felt since... I hate robots. Even if this one is funny and sarcastic, I ceremoniously attacked the immortal machine with my weakest knife and knocked him over. Of course, after he told me that Benny had run off to Fortification Hill. Speaking of which, the Wolfman was back. He told me to go see his dungeon master. I guess he's a really fair guy, but more importantly, he has Benny now. Guess I gotta head all the way back across the map. As soon as I stop by Gamora. I hear they have good food, kind of salty though. More civilized YouTubers would probably turn this place into Genesis 18, but I'm not civilized. Or a YouTuber. But I do like Big Sal. I really like his hat. Ladies love a guy in a fedora, so I turned Cachino in. Besides, that's not even a real name. Cachino? No wonder he spends his time with prostitutes and drugs. I'd hate myself too if I had a name like that. After forgetting to talk to Troik and Clandon to finish the quest, How Little We Know, I set off for the fort for my final showdown with Benny. On the way back, I stopped over at Camp Golf to help out the Misfits. Flags of Our Foul-Ups is a quest that has always stood out to me. While I do like the different ways that you can end the quest and the ending slide, I think it's a little too easy. Essentially, if you take the intended route and hit Camp Golf later in a standard playthrough, you'll have enough points in guns, explosives, and or speech to complete the good ending for this quest. Or, if you do what I did, just hit the main terminal in the lobby, and you can complete the bad ending for this quest, collect a decent amount of XP, and go on with your day. Just seems a little quick for a quest that affects the ending slides. But what do I know? I almost died to lake lurks. Lucky me, though, I had a sharp object that I flailed around in an untrained, ungraceful manner. I've also hoarded enough stim packs that I could spit in the face of a creature from the Black Lagoon. I grabbed some sushi meat as my reward, and the last one fled from me. Disgusted by his shameful display, I drank his house dry right in front of him, and then threw a spear at him to finish him off. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure lake lurk meat would be pretty awful. Not only would it be like 90% muscle, but I can imagine the steaks being oily enough to make Dick Cheney sweat. After fantasizing about mutilating and eating the corpse of an animal, I jumped into the water and swam for the crashed B-29 bomber. While it was nice of the boomers to give me a rebreather, I've always wondered how the machine that was crashed 300 years before the events of New Vegas was not only still relatively intact, but had enough functional parts in it to be used in the Battle of Hoover Dam. Maybe I should just have a little fun with the game instead of pointing out strange lore quirks. Then I don't seem as cool. By the time I doubled back to Novak, it was nighttime. Perfect. Breaking Benjamin's biggest fan is keeping watch from the town lizard. With Boone's hat still in my inventory, I kicked down Manny's door and told him to come see what happens when you water one of those dino sponges for a really long time. Before Manny could even ask what a sponge is, Boone sent his longtime buddy's brains into several different zip codes. When asked about how I knew it was him, I told him that it just felt right. Boone got mad. I got stabby. And Novak was down 2 snipers. The good news is that I got some free sunglasses from Boone in Helios 1, which is now in Legion hands. Wait a minute. Am I the bad guy? Nah, On my way back to see Kaiser, I cut through some Portland residents. I could tell where they were from because they were both strung out and violent, and I ran into some bighorners. They killed me. I'm not kidding. My first death in this run was from passive animals. Told you that below average luck thing was real? Spawning back at the autonomous zone, I made my way back to the beasts with a vengeance. I started by throwing dynamite at a scorpion and a bighorner. The scorpion is submissive. It dies when it's told to. But not the bighorner. It got up and ran for me. Like any good rancher, I chased my cattle by swinging randomly with a knife while running behind it until the animal got stuck on a rock. I collected my stakes and went after the family next. They were ready. I should have known. Ray Romano, mammoth expert, warns me when I was a small child. Still, I handled the situation the best way I knew how, by running as fast as I could and hucking the rest of my dynamite at my feet, hoping it would hurt them more than it hurt me. The fight of the century was like Hercules and the Hydra. I'd finish off one of these mammoths only for another two to chase me down. I used countless stems and throwing spears, and once I had the distance, I summoned the power of Chumbawamba, because every time they'd knock me down, I'd eventually get back up. Finally, it was just me and the bull. I took out my combat knife and finished the job. Clearly, putting all my perks into the first two levels of Swift Learner and maxing out toughness was a bad spec. But don't worry, I fixed it by taking the Cannibal perk. In a rage, I also increased my survival skill to 45. You need level 50 to make bighorner stakes. And believe me, it's on site now. Speaking of site, I hear Cottonwood Cove is pretty this time of year. But more importantly, Benny has a house there. Or at least a permanent home on the end of a machete. I entered the fort and dapped up my bros. Had to ask them how it was hanging. And I made my way to Kaiser. On the way, I caught a glimpse of what the Mojave would look like with these guys in charge. Another credit to New Vegas here. They don't shy away from some of the more gruesome aspects of the bad guys. I know it's just NPCs inside a game, but I think the modern tone for Fallout would avoid depicting this level of barbarity. Yes, Fallout 4 had slaves in Nuka World, but they looked like every other NPC, with dirt and grime and some deteriorating clothes. Here they're shown as emaciated women, carrying a massive ruck up and down a steep hill. The implication is that they will do this until they collapse. It's part of what makes the Legion the perfect foil to Vegas itself. Not just the NCR, but the actual city. Where Vegas is debaucherous, the Legion is brutal. But still, you can see how a faction like this would rise out of the tribes that were left after the Great War, and it gives the world plenty of grounding to take the more outlandish elements more seriously. And I think Kaiser's voice actor, like Mr. House, is also great. He doesn't come across as evil, just cold and stern. The perfect amount of charisma for a faction like this. An underrated aspect to try and persuade gamers to join or hate whatever faction it is that the game designers have created. Kaiser told me to finish what I started when I beat House with a chunk of concrete, and to defeat whatever it was that House had buried. Fighting through slow-moving robots wasn't hard. The turrets were. Well, not really. But they'd blow up and cripple my legs if I wasn't careful. Good thing I've got 10 pounds of doctor's bags on me. That's a lot of stethoscopes. I've reached the computer room, and I had a choice. Do I upgrade the Securitron army and set Benny free? Or do I mangle the generators and fully commit to a Legion run? After throwing a spear into the heart of the first generator I saw, I briefly considered doing a run with only throwing spears. Then I saw that Nurbit had already done one in 2023. Oof. Late to the party on that one. At least that comment will only get better with age. You may also be wondering why I chose to do a Legion run. First of all, I've never actually done one. In all of my private games, I always go against them. Second, the fact of the matter is, it's a New Vegas fan run. Not just any fan, that kind of fan. It's a great game, and I obviously believe that, but I'm talking about the people who take it way too seriously. Not someone who just looks at the Legion and says, hey, that's a well-written faction, but one that's just kinda edgy about it. After fighting Benny to the death, I was told to walk all the way back to Nellis Air Force Base and say hi to my aunt and my uncle. Oh, I meant boomers. Before leaving, I was sure to pick up the side quests Finger of Suspicion and I Hear You Knocking. So what's the deal with fast travel? It's not fast, and we're not traveling anywhere. Travel is something you pack for. It's more like a slow visit than a, oh look, something interesting. The man who gives you the key to the Legion safe house in the Dropbox was trying to track me down. I wanted to see if I could go the rest of the playthrough with him chasing me. I failed. The man must have been Chris Johnson or something. If the world hadn't turned to ash, and he hadn't joined a slave-owning, murderous cult, he could have joined the Olympic team. From there, I traveled back towards Clarkfield, bopped some geckos on the head, and stole their meat before heading out to Black Mountain. The first time around was with Veronica, and all I cared about was trapping all of her friends a mile under the earth. You know, in hindsight, for prematurely burying people she referred to as family right in front of her, she let me off easy. I guess fighting just isn't in her nature. Anyway, now it was time to finish the job. I climbed the summit just to punch the Blue Man Group in the face. Much like their Vegas concerts, I ended up sweaty, half dead, and consuming more substances than a 5'7" body should be able to handle. But at least I fought some guy I didn't even know over nothing. I freed Raoul and felt bad for him, so I escorted him home and had him repair my hat. Glad he had his wrench on him, or he wouldn't have been able to do it. Raoul's nice, one of my favorite companions. Reminds me of my dad, what with the death and his skin rotting off. Moving on, I made way back to the Mormon fort and donated all of my Fixer, Rad-X, and Med-X. While it was nice to be idolized by a poorly run group of hippies, part of me wonders if I should have kept my meds for later. Oh well, too late now. At least they idolize me. But you know what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. Speaking of punishment, I planned on doing the High Times quest quickly while in Freeside. While I don't need the followers' fame, some Freeside fame would be good, and completing this quest should help out with a very special follower later. Keyword is should. The quest starts by finding out my real-life doppelganger. You can tell because he's broke and bald and drinks too much. Asking him where he gets his fix, and he'll tell you right away, like any addict would. His dealer wanted me to pay him 300 caps to stop selling, so I used a chainsaw to sever his head from his neck and save $300. It's like a blue light special at Kmart, only with less blood and drugs. Speaking of drugs, I may want to do some after this quest. When speaking to Bill Ronte again, you're presented with a few options. Great, that's good design again. If you have a high enough speech skill, you can just tell this addict to get over it. Yeah, I'm sure that'll work. And finish the quest in 10 minutes. My speech is currently at 20 or so. Enough to break the news to your friend that they're ugly, but not enough to tell an addict to stop being addicted. What I do have, however, is a science skill of 65. At least now, instead of needing to find a total of 10 fixer chems, I only need to find 1 psycho, 1 buff out, and 1 fixer. I have 2 fixer and about 7 psychos, but I used both my buff outs after dropping Raoul off so I could sell my loot to the gunrunners. Seems like a waste, but what do I know? The other man you need to help is Jacob. I forget his last name because I drank too much. Same issue, I don't have enough speech skill to let him just get over it, but I have more than enough science to bring down his requirements. He needs a bottle of whiskey and 2 fixers. I just so happen to have 2. Stopped by the Atomic Wrangler to pick up some whiskey for the man and hoped they sold chems. The lady told me that they did, but didn't have any in her inventory. I'm really not trying to be sexist here, but hey, did you know they have slots here? Huh, no way, not with my luck. Just for your perspective, by this time, I was just over 10 minutes into this play session, and by the end of the quest, it was over an hour and a half. See, because I gave Jacob a bottle of whiskey and my last 2 fixers, I still needed another fixer and a buff out. The problem is, medical supplies aren't exactly easy to find, or maybe they are, and I'm not a real fan. But I checked the Crimson Caravan first, then the New Vegas Clinic, before heading over to North Vegas. I couldn't even find someone to trade with there, and to be honest, it's not a place I go to often. I then hurled myself at the Monte Carlo Motel. I figured the Scorpion gang that lives there would have drugs. They didn't. I did find a lunchbox though. Running out of nearby places to loot, harassing gang members, did give me an idea. The fiends are said to be chem addicts. Maybe they would have my fix for them. I made my way all the way to Vault 3. All you have to do is follow the same looking building over and over again. Trust me, these graphics weren't even great in 2010 either. I forced myself on the fiends, trying to turn them into handsome Squidward, but it didn't work out. At least they stopped screaming though. I got lost, trying to find my way by opening every door, and the more enemies I found, I figured it meant that I was going the right way. I kind of was. Stumbled on some prisoners, and then I found this frag mine. I avoided it and tried to go up the stairs, only to die. Life's so hard. Anyways, I went through it again. This time New Vegas, because one of the prisoners was outside of his cage. I was able to free them, and then found about 6 buff outs sitting on a desk. How convenient. Guess it's a better reward than what they gave me for freeing them. Nothing. Still, I needed to find Fixer. Fixer is a chem that temporarily fixes addiction. Creative name. But somehow, I don't think addicts would have... Oh, here it is. What luck. I should go to Vegas. Now annoyed that I have to go this far and die to find chems for someone I don't even like, I made my way back through the now disabled traps to find NCR Ranger Bryce Anders. He's the one that set up the traps in the first place, and with a 25 speech skill check and a 35 medicine plus and a doctor bag, you can patch him right up. Oh yeah, he hurt his leg. Wanting some modicum of vengeance, Bryce and I travel down to Motor Runner's lair in the maintenance room. Helping out Bryce is another way of getting to the end of this vault if you don't have the lockpick skill of 75 or higher. He gives you the key to the door. But I was excited. In lore and in-game, Rangers have decent armor and stats, so it should be fun. Or he could just get clipped in 2 seconds. Well, that's enough for me. I'm going home. Or at least back to Freeside. I spent an entire in-game day just on this one quest. I sure hope I need this quest just like I think I do, but that'll come later. For now, it's time to get back to the Strip. There's unfinished business at Gomorrah and Vault 21, and I don't mean with Sarah either. Actually, I'm kind of glad Anders died. I'm going to need some NCR armor. I made my way back to the Strip. This guy pointed and laughed at me for being ugly, and I followed up with Clandon and Troik 2 full days after their boss told me to do so. I'm one for promptness. I had also taken the liberty of buying chlorine from Mick at Nick and Ralph's, so I handed Jeffrey Dahmer some and upgraded myself to accessory to murder. Troy told me that some fiend stole his toy from the sandbox and I had to get it back. I'm just a mailman. What does he expect me to do? After talking to 2 people, New Vegas crashed. Guess it has social anxiety too. Once I loaded back in, I headed over to Vault 21 to meet up with a Legion informant. She is so good at being an informant that she doesn't even know she is one. And like any Italian woman at any given time, 3 Goombas have her cornered. After telling them nicely, I took out my super sledge and swung. They did nothing. I ended the first one, still nothing. I offed his buddy. They watched. It wasn't until I was halfway through my second swing that the last one saw me as a threat. I can't tell if New Vegas glitched or they were the biggest chads in the game. Don't know how many people could tank sledgehammer swings to the chest like that. I mean, not them because they died, but it's the thought that counts. I then left Vegas and made my way over to the Corvette meetup. Oops, I mean Boomers, where I finally told Loyal about the B-29 and Pearl gave me a necklace. Wait, no. A jumpsuit and a howitzer firing mechanism. Either way, it was a good Christmas. Speaking of Christmas, the traditional Latvian Brahmin steak came by to see me. Seriously, I have no idea where this thing came from or why it was hostile, but it was kind of creepy the way it would just charge at me with that vacant look on its face. In any case, I was appreciative of the meat. I like meat. Wait, not that. To entertain myself on the way back to the fort, I decided to go on my own quest for some Instamash. With my survival skill at 50, I can make caravan one. I have everything I need but some pseudo mashed taters. As annoyed as I am in real life with people that can't cook mashed potatoes, we are playing as a New Vegas fan. So the fact that we can even cook on our own is cause enough for celebration. I started by checking out the H&H Tools kitchen. I found pork and beans, but not much else that I needed. They had just about everything but Instamat. I then went to a home in North Vegas, found potatoes, but their mailbox was rigged. I checked the Del Rey Motel, the Basin Creek building, and the El Dorado gas station. At least I think that's what it's called. And nothing. I looked in 3 places. Unless Mom can find it, it's lost. I would say the same thing goes for my virginity, but then realized while speaking that I wrote Mom and not girlfriend. Despite now living in the South, it sure is in Alabama. I only root for good football teams anyways. Dejected from my lack of potatoes, I wondered about giving up my Irish-American heritage. But then I realized I'm working for a pseudo-Italian. And that's just American enough for me. Perfect, I'm still living up to my forefathers. After turning in my Legion quests and speaking to Kaisar, he told me to have some people for dinner. I told him it sounds sinister and hardly makes any sense. He told me to f myself and go bother the white gloves. At first, I was hurt by his outburst, but then I was able to diagnose him with demons in his skull, and I forgave him. I stopped by the Mojave outpost, 1, to pick up this drunk girl, and 2nd, to do some quests for the NCR so they won't send people after me. I would be annoyed by it at this point. It didn't help. They sent rangers after me. But not wanting to continue the cycle of violence, I ran for Novak. After being considered well rested for sleeping at 4 an hour, as I typed this I realized how much of a military simulator New Vegas actually is. I made my way for the Mojave outpost, unaware of a problem that was further going to derail this playthrough. See, part of why this run is as long as it is, I wanted to interact with as many of the companions as I could. When I skipped over to Nipton earlier in the run, I missed interacting with Cass to get the Heartache by the Number quest. Great song, by the way. Anyway, part of this quest is to see Alice McLafferty at the Crimson Caravan. And here's where the inefficiencies. One of the things that I like to do with this game in particular is to plan what quests I can get done where and then move on, so it limits the backtracking. I get that it's not unique, and a number of others probably play that way as well, but in so many RPGs, I'll fast travel when given the option. New Vegas is usually the exception, except in times like this. I am not walking all the way back to Vegas just to get more quest markers and no XP, so I bit the bullet. It was my mistake that it took this long anyhow, and I spoke with Alice. She had me go speak with Peter at Camp McCarran. Seems like a big jerk. But regardless, he said words and tried to get me to go to something called Vault 22 for him. Sounds like a lame party. My idea of a good time is eating an entire bag of family-sized Cheez-Its and getting the crumbs all over my keyboard. At least I had things to do at the airport, none of which involved flying. First, I went to see Lieutenant Boyd. She told me to leave before I even walked in the door. I'm used to it. Then I went to see Ronald Curtis and loudly exclaimed that I knew who he was. He told me that I'd ruin the whole senior prank if I kept talking. To divert the teacher's attention, I'd have to plant the evidence in one of the nerds' lockers and then pull the prank myself. No problem. I gave him a quick kiss on the cheek for good luck, planted evidence, gave that nerd a good fisting, and then pulled the funniest prank I'd pulled since the one I pulled on my mom by getting fat and dropping out of high school. It leveled me up, which I got repaired to 90 and took the Unstoppable Force perk. This lets me do melee damage, even through blocks. After this, I went back to the Crimson Caravan and finally got the second part of the quest, the part that actually lets you recruit Cass. I fast traveled all the way back to the outpost, and I couldn't wait to bring her to the White Gloves so that they could eat her. Well, look at that. Intimidated into silence by a woman at a bar. I've been there before. I had few options to sacrifice. Without access to Cass, Boone is dead, Veronica won't talk to me, and I'm saving Rich Gannon for something later. I am faced with a very real prospect of having to complete Beyond the Beef by finding St. Clair, foiled by my own stupidity. Defeated, I turned back to Vegas to first meet Mortar the Cannonball, then finish at Grimora. After speaking to Mortimer, annoyed that I couldn't feed him the whiskey-marinated Cass, I passed the cannibal skill check, and I got the quest. I met Ted, failed the speech check, and started to think that I might have to make him the main. I went back up the stairs to see about grabbing St. Clair, and the game crashed. Fine, Ted it is. It's about time to wrap up this run anyways. I loaded back in, stole I loaded back in, no wait, what's 3, 2, 1. I loaded back in, stole a knife from the white glove. Guess you could call them the red gloves now. Ha ha. I murdered 10 Gunderson in cold blood. Get it? Because of the freezer? I stole all my jokes from a 1930s joke book. When I got back to the door that connects the Gaumont to the rest of the Ultralux casino, I was slightly worried that it might crash, but it didn't. I used a stealth boy to frame Heck Gunderson, great name by the way, and made my way out to grab a Securitron, which kind of lore-wise confuses me. Without installing Yes Man and removing Mr. House, shouldn't the robots shut down? Maybe not, and I'll grant that it would break a few quests, or at least this one if that was I swear that's what I was thinking about when I was distracted by the drunken troopers in the fountain. I told on Heck, and like any innocent man, he started blasting. Convenient how all that worked out in my favor. With that quest done, I had to wait until 7 p.m. to give Mortimer Kaiser's request. I stopped by Gamora for hopefully the last time in this run, and the game crashed. Yay! Again loading back in, I finished up How Little We Know and became shunned on the strip. You'd think they'd appreciate all the help, but then again, they're modeled after New Yorker. Probably some of them are Jets fans, and you can never make those people happy. It still wasn't 7, so I waited until 7:04. Enough time for a fancy bouquet to end, okay? I think that line is banquet, but I legitimately just said bouquet. Yeah, what the hell. And jumped back into the Ultralux. Mortimer was nowhere to be found. I waited until 8, he wasn't there. Now feeling like a patient in a waiting room, I took a seat, ready to start yelling at the next nurse thing by. I'm old and cranky after all. I had to wait, and Vegas said I was in the air, so I stood, waited until 9, then 10, then I forgot. Mortimer is a French name. No wonder he's not working. So I waited until 8 a.m. the next day, and once Mortimer had his human croissant and cigarette, see because he's a cannibal now, he was ready to talk to me. He was happy to tell me, out loud, that he likes to eat people, which was nice and all, but there was no dialogue option to have him join up with Little Caesars. Turns out, you have to go to Marjorie after completing Beyond the Beef, and she'll accept the offer. Still, the quest marker for Morty never goes away, so that's nice. After leaving the strip, I avoided the blue door of death. For whatever reason, my New Vegas likes to crash after using that door, but not if you enter it from Freeside or if you use it to fast travel. That's what's so great about this game. Even the glitches are randomized so that each player gets their own set of crashes and game-breaking bugs. Because my reputation with the Legion is liked, I knew that Ganondorf would never accept my ask to have him follow me, but if I made the same ask in NCR armor, he'd happily tag along. Guess he has a thing for men in uniform. Once I had his allegiance, I was first notified that I lost Veronica's scribe assistant perk and that she had returned to the 188 trading post. Odd. I figured she left me when I spat on the graves of her closest friends. Huh. I was more worried that Arcade Cabinet would give me some dialogue about being liked by the Legion if I took off my sexy NCR armor. I took a chance that maybe if I fast traveled to the fort, nope, they were not having it. So I reloaded a save and gave it another shot. Turns out the only dialogue that Pac-Man has for me at the fort is dialogue for his questline when you first enter the fort. My bad. I made him wait outside the tent while the adults talked about war, and Kaiser told me to eliminate the Brotherhood, which I already did. Then he had a stroke or something. I don't know, I'm not a doctor. Despite the 80 medicine skill. I did the skill checks for the XP, but then told the Emperor that I had a better doctor waiting outside. Betraying Arcade, I was then given the last quest, Arizona Killer, and branded a terrorist by the NCR. Oh, I also didn't need to do the Bill Ronte quest and all of that. Yay. I fast traveled to Nelson and finished clearing the rest of the NCR from Forlorn Hope. I'd say that they should have named it better, but now the name seems really fitting. Full disclosure, I've never completed this quest, which is a great reason to record it. Despite having NCR armor on, the guy who gives you the quest, Kato, tells you that the Rangers will see you through your disguise. Logically, I understand that, but I have the gaming skill of a Let's Player because practically, I ignored this very obvious dialogue. At this point in the game, I've completely removed guns from my weapon, so at the start, I was worried about how I'd get to Kimball. My explosive skill isn't high enough to plant the bomb on the vertibird, and you need 50. I have a skill of 17. You can't get close to the stage without the NCR freaking out and failing the quest. But I do have a few stealth bullets, so maybe I could use those. While I was debating all this in my head, I wasn't paying attention to the very obvious Ranger right here, and was spotted immediately. Oops, time to reload a save. Conveniently, my last save was at Cottonwood Cove. Welp. I've traveled back to Nelson, hit the NCR even harder at Forlorn Hope, and started the quest again. This time, I was sure to save. Predictably, Kato, whom you can't start the quest without, got stuck. I'm sure this is funny to watch, but at this point, I just wanted to get this run over. We're 26 pages into this script, and this clown just has to dry hump this guardrail, doesn't he? I tried pushing him, and he came to the same vacant stare as the Brahmin had when that randomly attacked me. I tried talking to him. Maybe the quest can start from here anyways, but the only thing I can do is tell him goodbye. Great, what fun. Oh good, he teleported. Guess this clown's circus routine was over. You know, my friends call me a clown, but I don't believe them because my feet are too small. But my nose is red on account of all the alcohol. Now armed with a quick save and a stealth boy, I used years of COD experience to find the perfect camping corner. I actually had no idea that Kimball would walk right in front of me. In my excitement, I swung at him, and I missed. He took off like EDP after a cupcake, and the Rangers put more holes in me than SpongeBob. I reloaded again, but this time, I used VATS, the thing that made Fallout famous in the 90s. I spanned my attack at Kimball and finally got him. Happy to have this run over for once, I finally ran for the safety of the fort, and I died. Deep down, I know it's my fault, but I really want to blame someone or something else. Let me know in the comments what your favorite scapegoat is. Alright, for real this time. I injected many chemicals into my body, namely Psycho and Med-X. And like any proper addict, I assaulted the nearest authority figure. He went down in one mighty blow, and I jumped around like the best Halo 3 player you've ever seen and made my getaway. Finally. After healing, I stopped by Ranger Station Delta to test the effectiveness of the Liberator for the upcoming battle. There's going to be plenty of veteran Rangers at the dam, and there's a few at Delta. Turns out my machete must be dull because it's awful. After wasting a few stim packs, I pulled out my sledgehammer to finish the job. But with its poor condition, I know I won't be able to use it often. Hopefully my power fist can get me through this. I'm not saying that intense fisting can get you out of anything, but this is one of those cases. With the completion of the Legion questline, I ranked up to level 20 and took my final perk. After maxing out medicine and getting science to 90, I chose the Living Anatomy perk for 5% damage against humans, or additional damage against humans. Immediately I regretted not taking jerry rigging. After switching back to the Liberator for the NCR troops, I made my way to General Oliver. It wasn't bad. With my endurance as high as it was, I was able to tank most of the shots from the regular NCR troops and swipe at them when they got close. When I got to Hoover Dam Visitor Center, I was given a gift. 4 NCR heavy troopers showed, and I used my slasher chems that I had made to overcome them. It was a Christmas miracle. Each one also had a super sledge, meaning that with my repair at 90, I felt better about not taking the jerry rigging perk. Still, I don't think I made the right choice. Ready to fight and get to General Oliver, I pushed through most of the NCR under the dam, and the game crashed. Nice try, but I'm too close to the end to quit now. When I did finally get to him, I sped through his dialogue, downed all 4 of my rushing waters that I had made, which give you a 50% increase in attack speed and a little bit of health regen. Survival is a great skill if you spec into it. I guess kind of like real life. For a guy that boasts about how this place can defend itself against an army, Oliver really only has like one Riddler trap that pretty easy to get around. Oh, I died. Never mind, I guess he knows what he's doing. Now just eager to get to the ending slides, I crushed as many NCR as I needed to and ran through the traps again. This time, I took the right side with the bear traps and rangers taking pot shots at me. To be honest, I think I prefer fighting the Legate. Before reaching Oliver, I downed 2 psychos and 3 medics, just to be sure I could get through this. Combined with the rushing water, it was over in a few clicks of the mouse. And that was it. No more crashes, no more bugs, and no more stupid jokes from me. It was finally over. As the result of my run, the New Vegas story ended like this. Goodsprings was mostly abandoned out of fear of the Legion. Prim Slim didn't really grasp the reality of the situation, and Prim was handed to the Legion. I didn't get an ending slide for Cass. Novak had little allies or anyone to defend it, and also fell to the Legion. Boone died. The Brotherhood of Steel no longer existed in the Mojave, and Veronica decided to move on. Black Mountain was abandoned, and Raoul decided to take a new name and a new life somewhere else. From Vault 19, the Powder Gangers continued to harass NCR citizens. The Great Khans fought alongside the Legion, and for their loyalty were forcibly integrated into Caesar's army, except for the women who became unwilling wives and slaves. The Fiends attacked McCarran and failed. The Legion had them exterminated. Kaiser took New Vegas and forcibly removed the kings, but did allow the followers of the Apocalypse to move peacefully. Arcade Gannon was forced to become Kaiser's personal physician for many years before he forcibly checked himself out with a surgical scalpel. The Boomers were left alone, but remained isolated, occasionally flying over the wasteland. As for my thoughts, do I consider this run a success? Maybe. I had intended to meet as many companions as possible, and really take my time with this game, but the reality of recording a run that was over 15 hours and editing and writing a script which lasted 11,000 words and 30 double-spaced pages did start to wear on me. You could actually probably hear it in my voice as this went on, also aside from the rough editing. Plus, my failure to get Cass eaten by cannibals was a failure. In hindsight, I should have either skilled into barter more or just had Veronica eaten earlier on. It wasn't a terribly clean run, and I think the joke of, hey, the New Vegas community can get kinda edgy with their love of the bad guys, wore a bit thin and didn't hit as hard as, say, a run with only the Liberator. Again, probably gonna do that soon. But in all, I still had fun. This is a great game, and I do love it. Stick around, because up next we have a Pokemon Emerald run that should be as torturous for me to run through as it should be for you to watch it. But I'll have plenty of jokes, so kind of like real life. And just like if you saw me in real life, like, subscribe, and I will catch you on the next one.